What's up, guys? So I've been pretty dissatisfied with the landscape of mobile games lately. There are a few good ones out there, but for the most part, it's a lot of crap. And so I've actually been dipping my toes into helping improve the mobile gaming experience, in particular by consulting on a couple different projects that I can't really talk about until early next year. But yeah, the short version is I'm helping mobile game developers make better mobile games. And one of the projects that I still have a lot of hope for is Mortal Kombat Onslaught. So on that note, this is going to be a video about some of the things that I think are absolutely critical that Mortal Kombat Onslaught fixes or adjusts before global launch. So the way I've structured this video is I'm actually going to be listing about 8 things that I think that the devs should really take a look at, going in order of importance, starting from the least important and ending up at the things that I think are just the most crucial to address. And although I am starting with a few things that are not as important, generally speaking, these suggestions also go in order of the difficulty or time or effort that it would take to actually make these changes. But all right, let's kick it off. Starting with number 8, adjust the 10 times summon to give some benefit. So this one, for example, is not something that I think will cost all the players. I don't think it's something that'll make everyone quit. It's just something that would be so easy to address, and I want to make sure the devs understand how it's currently being perceived, which is in pretty much every other gacha game or hero collector game of this type. They have the multi-summon, whether it's a 10-time summon or a 20-time summon, something like that, but they always have some incentive for doing the batch pull, whether you get a free bonus pull or you get a discount on the cost. You're only paying for 9.5 summons, but you still get all 10, or whether there's a pity guarantee built into the 10, like you're guaranteed at least 1 rare if you're going to do a 10-time summon. But whatever it is, there's always some incentive for doing the multi-pull. So what happens in this game is people join the Discord and they'll say, hey, maybe I'm just confused. Is there any reason I would want to hold out and do that 10 pull? And we have to give them the answer of no, it makes no difference whatsoever. And then everyone's immediate reaction is, oh, bummer, that's lame. And so this is just such an easy fix. Just change it to be slightly lower cost or give 1 extra drop, whatever you do. But players of this type of game are accustomed to there being some benefit for the multi-pull, so put it in there. All right, number 7, adjust the set bonuses for haste and critical damage. Now again, this is not the end of the world. I don't think a bunch of players are going to quit over this, but you're just kind of shooting yourself in the foot with a lot of the things that you're trying to do, like sell critical damage gear sets and haste gear sets. And the reason I'm calling these 2 out is because the benefits that these 2 gear sets offer are just atrocious compared to the others. Haste, for example, is a 4-piece set, which means that it directly competes with the other 4-piece sets, like the attack set, except that it offers 20% haste. The problem here is that you can only get haste on a single gear piece, and it's not even on any relics. So if you are one of the few players who still has a tier 4 gear piece, most players right now can only get tier 3, even if you max that piece out, at most you're getting a whopping 40 haste. And then if you have the set bonus for another 20%, you get a grand total of 8 more haste. I don't know a single player or a single combat instance where 8 haste is even remotely worth considering when you could have plus 35% attack on the character. Even if they're a support, it's very irrelevant. And I'm trying to look forward and assume that you will be able to get more haste on higher tier gear pieces, but it still just seems way too low. So either haste needs to do a little bit more, or this set bonus needs to grant a lot more, or it should just be changed to something else. The issue with critical damage is that critical damage as a set bonus is just nowhere near generous enough. It's only giving 40% critical damage, and again, that's a 4-piece set bonus that has to rival the attack set, which is 35% attack. So 35% attack will apply to all of your abilities, while 40% critical damage will only apply to your crits. This means that anything less than 90% crit rate and the attack set is better, And if you do have 90% or above crit rate, that means you can get up to 5% more damage out of the crit damage set. And then as soon as you're affinity countered, your crit rate is going to drop below that 90% threshold. So there's just no reason to ever use the crit damage set over the attack set unless you don't have any other gear pieces to give a character. So that one, again, seems to me like a simple fix. Just increase what that set does to 60, 70% crit damage, whatever you guys decide the right number is. All right, number 6. Add a function to cancel a special ability. So this one can be pretty annoying. Certain characters are just kind of screwed by this mechanic. Basically, when you go to activate a special, there is no way to cancel the activation, right? The action stops, it lets you aim the attack, and on some characters, for example, you'll find out, oh, the target I'm trying to hit is out of range, so I just can't select a target, so I'll just select no target. And for characters who have abilities like that, when you select no target, it's fine, the ability doesn't go off, and it's still ready for you to use at a later time when you are in a better position. However, there are plenty of characters that have a ground targeting ability, for example. And so once you go to use that ability, if you start exploring options for where to place it and you realize, oh, I can't get enough enemies inside of this AoE, I don't want to fire it off just yet, well, too bad. Because even if you try to drag it outside of the range and just drop it in an area where it doesn't target any enemies, those characters will still just fire their abilities on the ground, hitting nothing, and there's no way to back out of your decision to attempt to fire that special. Those characters just kind of get screwed if you don't have pinpoint precision in knowing exactly where and when you want to fire that ability. So again, this one seems like a pretty simple fix to me. Just add an area on the screen where you can drag over to like an X in the top right, and that will just act as a, never mind, I don't want to fire this right now. All right, number 5. And this one's kind of vague, but Arena is inherently problematic and exploitable. So this one's kind of vague. There's a lot of solutions to it, but essentially at the core of the problem, you can challenge an opponent, and if you lose, absolutely nothing prevents you from re-challenging them. So you have a lot of people doing what we've referred to as boosting, and I should mention that among the general player community, it's all done as above board as possible. People are transparent about doing it and who their alt accounts are. It's not been a real problem yet, but as soon as this game gets turned loose to the general public, of course, people are going to have some objections to the way this is being done. Because essentially you can just find your main account on an alt account and just keep losing to it over and over and over and feeding it a tremendous amount of points. And of course you can build up the points to maintain a rank by just going in your defense log and fighting defense matches. So something that limits your ability to repeatedly find and lose to your main account over and over and over and over, only having to bump into it once and then being able to challenge and lose to it infinitely for the rest of the season, that for sure needs to be addressed. I think Arena should probably be looked at before Global. Number 4, Soulbind really needs to be overhauled. Now, Soulbind has some glaring problems. I am aware that soulbinding characters is what essentially raises the level cap and therefore allows you to give more levels to the character. And that is significant depending on the star of the character, but also just the stats gained from starring up are unbelievably negligible. And so it makes acquiring the souls very unsatisfying. For example, right now the level cap for characters being 80, as long as you're able to get characters to 4-star, anything beyond that doesn't matter. But the actual change in stats, which stats are actually changed, it's all just very nonsensical. So the only stats that change when you soulbind a character right now are attack and HP. That's it. Now, that right away is kind of odd because there's 3 primary stats. There's attack, HP, and defense. I don't know why defense gets neglected, so automatically soulbinding becomes even less valuable to defensive characters, which is just a weird decision. But the overall values that you get from a Soulbind, these are approximate, but when you go from 3 to 4 star, you're getting about plus 3% attack and plus 3% HP. When you go from 4 to 5, it's a little bit less. It's like plus 2.89% attack and plus 2.89% HP. And then it goes up a little bit when you're going from 5 to 6. It's plus 3.78% attack and plus 3.78% HP. Again, these are just approximates, but it's very, very small, sub 5% increases. And it takes a long time to acquire these souls, and you want to be very thoughtful on how you're spending them and which characters you're giving them to. And then to get just that small of a bump, I mean, the state of the game already is where we have gear pieces that are giving 12% attack and 5% HP on one gear piece. So when you have gear pieces like that, the Soulbind doing less, all the Soulbinds, taking a character from 3 star to 6 star, giving fewer stats than a single piece of gear, it just feels bad. And again, I understand that the level cap is attached to the Soulbind, but that being the only benefit, it still feels profoundly underwhelming. Soulbinding should, generally speaking, improve the stats of lower star characters so that on a purely stat for stat basis, those lower star characters can actually be relevant. One of the things that greatly holds back a lot of the 3-star characters in the game right now is just their stats. Even if you fully upgrade their abilities, they're just bad characters as far as their stats. And although you can improve it a bit with gear, the Soulbind doesn't do anything to make them even, so they're just always vastly inferior, when what should be differentiating them is just their abilities. They should just have somewhat inferior abilities, but it should at least be tempting to use them when you have the right synergies, other characters kind of empowering them. But as it stands, Soulbinding is just garbage. Number 3, please give us gear sets. Now, this one's pretty straightforward. We already have preset saved teams, so this functionality would be very similar, so it's definitely something that's not too much trouble to do. But one of the main gameplay experiences right now is shuffling around gear depending on what content you're doing, because most players, even the top players, are lucky if they have a few good sets of gear. But of course, you need to be using all different characters for different content. When you're trying to affinity counter the boss towers, there are already enough boss towers that you want one really good team of mind characters, one really good team of body, one really good team of spirit. Then you have your arena team. So you're just constantly shuffling around your best gear and your best relics for when you're trying to make a push to clear tougher content that you haven't cleared before. And without having gear sets, that process is arduous, it's long, it's boring, it's time consuming, and it feels terrible. I'm also just passing along that I do see a lot of players immediately complain about how much they hate being charged to unequip items, because in most games it doesn't cost you anything to unequip or re-equip, and so players feel like this game goes out of their way to tax players for something that other games let you do for free. So, all right, now these last two, in my opinion, are easily the most important ones. Now, as I mentioned, although I feel that both the next couple things I'm going to talk about are super critical, these are probably not things that can be implemented overnight. They probably will take a little bit of time and thought and effort, but I wholeheartedly believe that it will make all the difference in the world what kind of success the game has and what kind of reception the game gets upon launch. So I wanted to for sure mention them, even though they're not necessarily a small ask. So number 2, add or restructure a game mode to have good replay value. And this one's pretty huge, and I'm not entirely sure that it's quite understood why, so I wanted to stress it. Basically, the current gameplay loop, if you've beaten levels in the Chasm, you're just auto-winning them. If you've beaten levels in Boss Tower, you're just auto-winning them. Maybe for a little bit, you try and beat Boss Tower, a stage that you have not cleared before, and maybe if you're really close, you keep at it and you're able to get that clear. But most days, you're just auto-winning, or you give it a try at a higher tier, you find out you're not even close, and then you just table it for later. Arena is compelling and fun to play, except that unless you feel like spending hard currency, you're just going to get to do 5 matches in one sitting, and then you have to wait around for more. And Story, although you can replay it, there's absolutely zero reason to replay Story, because once you've gotten the rewards from Story once, you've gotten the rewards from Story. So right now, pretty much all of the experienced players can only play for about 15 minutes a day. They do the things they have to auto-win, maybe they attempt something and determine it's too hard for them and they'll come back to it later. They play their arena matches, and they're pretty much done. There's just not much to do. But more importantly, as, for example, a creator who wants to help promote the game and show that the game is being played and it's fun, I am unable to stream the game because after 15 minutes, I have nothing to do. And it's not because I'm too strong. I'm factoring in, even if I were mid-tier, all that would open up for me is some boss tower. And watching me fail at boss tower over and over and over because I'm not quite strong enough for that next level isn't the most compelling content. It's better than what we have now, but still, that's about it. There's just no way to make any kind of sustained live stream for this game, and I think that that is a big problem. People do like to stream mobile games, and it goes a long way towards the perception of the game. It allows people to see it and engage with the community when they play it, and there just aren't any game modes that you can continue to play and continue to earn rewards for. And I understand with the current economy, it might not make sense to have a well of infinite rewards that you can generate, but it is worth taking the time to come up with some other currency sink that would be tempting to spend the rewards on in exchange for a game mode where you can continue to churn out rewards so that you can play for an hour or two at a time and get really involved in the game and be able to make a live stream with content for the game. So I think it's really, really important that either a new game mode is added or one of the current ones is reworked so that it has good replayability and it's worth playing for more time each day. And I also want to mention, many games are made intentionally to not require a significant amount of daily playtime. And there's always a discussion to be had. Some players want to play all day. Some players are lucky if they can squeeze in an hour every day, and anything more than that is asking way too much. And they'll be unhappy if they're missing out on things because they don't have that much time to play. So I also wanted to share what was essentially revealed to be the golden ratio when it comes to things like this, which is essentially you want 85% of the daily rewards to be available within the short window of playtime, whatever's determined to be an acceptable short amount of time to play, so like an hour or two. And then you want to allow for up to 15% more rewards to be accrued if someone is willing to put in considerably more time, if they want to play for another couple hours, maybe even 4 or 5 more hours. And the reason for this is twofold. Essentially, the players who can only play for the first hour or two, as long as they're getting 85% of the rewards, they don't really feel like they're missing much, so they're not broken up about not being able to play for more because it's just a small amount of rewards that they're missing. However, the players that have all day to play and do want to grind and put in the time and try to get that edge and really claw their way forward will find that 15% more rewards is worth their time to work a little harder and play a little longer to get ahead. Create something with that ratio in mind. And finally, number 1, combat just feels too hands-off. Now, I am aware that this is intended to be an idle-style game. Of course, it's not a fighter. I'm very familiar with this genre of game, and so I do understand that the goal was for it to not require an immense amount of attention, reflexes, anything like that. But even among idle games, the game is way too hands-off, and even among players who are accustomed to idle-style games, many of them still complain that the game mostly feels like watching. It doesn't feel like you are actually partaking in the gameplay. Most of the gameplay decisions happen before the actual combat. You're choosing your gear, you're choosing which abilities to empower, you're choosing how to position the characters. This is all good, but once you actually enter combat and the word fight is shouted and all the excitement is supposed to occur, you're mostly watching. Now, again, there is some skill expression in terms of using the abilities, but there needs to be more. And this is agreed upon by pretty much everybody. There needs to be more skill expression. It doesn't need to be remade into a completely different game, but for example, I want to show you some footage of a game called Counterside, which is also an idle-style hero collector. Now, although this game has characters with auto abilities and then an ultimate that you manually activate, which you can set on auto, there are some other things that are at play as well. For example, you are also choosing where on the field to deploy the units. So that is an added form of skill expression because you want to drop your characters onto the field at the right time and in the right place. Now, this isn't necessarily a solution that works for Onslaught, but it's just an example of another idle style game that has yet another method of skill expression. Also, Counterside has ship skills, which is you're also loading in with a ship. And the ship has its abilities, and those abilities are simply unique to that ship and have nothing to do with the characters. And so at some point during the match, you activate the ship skill, and that's either going to affect all your allies or all the enemies or both, but it's essentially an over-the-top ability. So that is one way that this could be implemented in Onslaught, is you could add in like a summoner spell, something that you just press and no matter who's on the field, it just heals everyone a percentage of their HP, or it barriers them and gives them all a shield, or it just applies a quick burn to the entire enemy team. You could essentially let players choose which summoner spell they wanted to bring into the match to use, or let them bring in two, something like that. But either way, pretty much everyone agrees there needs to be a few more buttons, a few more things to do. I don't know how viable this suggestion is, but another possible option is to allow the players to click and hold on a portrait and then drag over to an enemy and basically allow the player to assign the targeting, to call someone to go attack someone else. Now, I know the current combat isn't really balanced for that, so you could put rules on who they could be assigned to go attack. But again, just giving players a bit more control over the action in the fight, I think would go a long way, because pretty much everyone's first impression of this game is it just feels like watching. And nobody wants to watch a game, they want to play a game. So there have to be a few more buttons that do things, even for an idle style game. But alright, I hope that was helpful. I hope that didn't come across as just bashing the game, because I really do enjoy the game. I really do want it to succeed, but going off of the reactions that I'm getting from people, it seems that a lot of the pain points that I made sure to mention in this video are kind of shared by everyone, and most of the people still playing, even during this early access, have effectively said that the only reason they're still playing is because they're hopeful that these things get addressed, and mainly because I've been reassuring them, don't worry, I will do whatever I can to get this feedback across to the devs in the hopes that they address it. So we're all hoping that this stuff is addressed in some capacity, and the more of these things that are not addressed before launch, when it comes to something like a global launch, you only get one chance at a first impression with a lot of gamers, and I would hate to see the game immediately make a bad impression on a lot of players when it doesn't have to be that way. So I wanted to bring up all the things that I think it would be important to address, but otherwise there are a lot of areas of the game that are really, really good, so we're rooting for you guys. So thanks for checking out this video, and I will see you guys real soon. Until next time. Peace!